You're listening to the ADHD Heroes Podcast, a podcast where we speak with the heroes of the ADHD community, namely educators, mental health professionals, and of course, those with ADHD themselves, to gain insights, tools, and most importantly, inspiration towards succeeding and thriving with ADHD. I'm your host, Rabbi Shmuel Reich, a high school Rebbe and an ADHD coach in private practice. Welcome to the show. Hi there. On this week's episode of the podcast, Rabbi Elchonon Galbut came on to share his ADHD story. Rabbi Galbut and I worked together in the summer in my yeshiva's summer camp, where he is the camp director. The program at the moment does not actually quite have a name. There are a few ideas that have been thrown around. He makes a little bit of a reference to it early on in the interview, so now you're in on the joke too. We discussed the importance of the role his parents played in his support as a kid, strong emotionality as both a challenge and a tool, adapting to different new life stages, the value of structure, the skill of delegation, benefits of creative outlets, a phenomenon some would call ADHD superpowers, and a lot more. Enjoy. Rabbi Elchonon Galbut, welcome to ADHD Heroes Podcast. I'm excited for our conversation today.
It's an honor to be here. I too am excited, and we're going to go on a journey together. It's super exciting.
Okay, awesome. Let's do it. So first, a little bit about yourself and your background.
Well, I'm 47 years old. Baruch Hashem, I was born and raised in Miami Beach, Florida. I went to high school. I went to school here my entire life. Graduated from high school here from the Hebrew Academy, more modern Jewish day school here in South Florida, catering to just giving a chance to everybody who wanted it to sort of stay in touch with and connect to the Judaism, and did not come from a very Shivish, Hasidish, Litvish, any kind of super religious background, but it's pretty basic connections to mitzvahs and Yiddishkeit, and then when I graduated, went to Eretz Yisrael, learned there for a little bit, and went to OJ, and then left after about a month and moved to KBY, learned there for a couple of years, ended up in YU, left there to go to Nei Yisrael. So I've got a little bit of a journey in finding myself through the educational system. And then ended up living in Baltimore, married, Baruch Hashem. When I got married at about 21, a little short of 22. And then started working about 2 years later in DC and Maryland, doing some real estate. I did that for about 5 years there, 6 years there, and then had some opportunities to come back down home here to Miami, South Florida, and started a company here with my father and a few cousins, also in real estate. And when the market crashed in about 2007 and 8, started doing some different kinds of investing, spending a lot more time in the Koil down here, ended up branching off and building the Masifta, which now we call Sifta Chotam Shulish, who actually has a number of names, but that's one of my favorites. And in Pennsylvania, that you and I, we spent so many years, I think almost 10 years together every summer. It's been a real honor for me. At the same time, trying to rebuild business and opportunities down here in South Florida, raising our beautiful family here, Baruch Hashem. I'm so grateful for my wife from Lawrence, Long Island. I pulled her down here. We have we have Leah and her 7 children, ranging from the age of 6 to 24. Baruch Hashem, a married child, our daughter, Hashem, a grandfather, and Mishat Tumitzlach, expecting our second baby soon, grandchild soon. And I've now found myself basically in what I would call private equity / I'm a relationship-based lender, which I can explain what that means if you're interested. I'm a business entrepreneur. I have skills in most areas of real estate investment and management, and I love people. Absolutely love people. And I love people that are kind. I love people that are giving. I love people that will put things before money. I mean, I love everybody, and even the people that put money first, I love them too. But I have maybe a little less patience for them. But so I look for real strategic partnerships that really give me a certain sense of chayim, and I feel very, very blessed to still live here in Miami Beach. I travel back and forth to Eretz Yisrael a few times a year. Baruch Hashem, I travel to New York. I like to vacation. I try to live a pretty balanced life, although in the end of the day, bottom line is that I work on very hard at identifying, consistently as a Ben Torah, and I want to constantly send the message in our relationship with the Baruch Shalom that I'm not afraid to be Meiser Nefesh. I really would like to be, and everything I do. So that's really my focus. That's the best way to really introduce myself and my background.
Amazing. Okay, we definitely see that side of the side of the learning side. He's been to the Kollel and the people side in camp, and maybe the business side too. So lots of great stuff, great memories, and Rich Hashem will go see more. Okay, so let's bring it all the way back to elementary school. What was that? What was that like for you? What was hard and what was easy?
Wow. I don't have a lot of memories. It's super interesting. I don't have a lot of memories being in elementary school. I remember very much so looking for quality friendships. I found myself, consistently looking to be invited over by others, to be accepted by others. The attention that I needed in school, that I was, or the attention that I enjoyed. It's difficult to know whether I needed or I enjoyed it, or felt stimulated by it. It took its form in a number of different ways. I was really all over the place. It's very hard for me to, stay focused. I don't really remember in those early, years anything regarding my grades or how well I excelled at school or not. I know I had a pretty good memory. I don't remember doing poorly in school. I knew that I needed to be refocused. I knew that I started at a young age, probably around 11 or 12, because I really had a hard time sitting. I had a tremendous amount of energy, and it was hard to focus in class. But I remember starting at a very young age taking Ritalin. I'd take the 20 or whatever it was, or the 10s in the morning, and they had that quick release. And I had to deal with that at a pretty young age, and then really carry that through, in high school. But in elementary school, I look back and, they definitely also struggled with being made fun of a little bit or a lot, so very sensitive, a little bit manic in terms of not really knowing how to think through my emotions. So, you can say, like anyone under the age of 13, we say, "Eino bardas," like, but my parents were really super, super good at being patient. There's so many pictures and videos of myself, like all over my father, giving him kisses and hugs and sort of hanging on his shoulders, and my father just allowing me to sort of just be with him in that space. Very touchy, extremely loving little children. I remember, always wanting to babysit, my younger cousins. Till today, I have a real special love and affinity for my younger cousins, because I remember taking care of them as a kid, pushing them in the strollers, playing with them in the swing sets. I found that to be a very pure form of connection, a non-judgmental form of connection. In terms of what was easy, I could tell you that I didn't have a hard time expressing myself, that's for sure. When something bothered me, I let everybody know. And when I was excited about something, that's what I wanted to do. A little bit stubborn. My younger years, I remember they used to say about me, I'd be sitting there by the cabinets playing with the handles, just sort of banging them into the cupboard. I was stimulated by that. And sports was difficult. Anything really organized was a little bit difficult. I got into certain things like skiing, when I turned 14, 15. I enjoyed the freedom of that, learning that skill. But, it was mostly just coasting through and trying to get to know myself.
It sounds like the adults navigated this very well, I would say, from what you're describing.
At a young age, my parents were on top of trying to get me structured. Without structure, it's pretty hard for me to learn the mechanics of certain behavior and the social cues and the skill sets and so on. So my mother was not shy of trying to seek out the right help, whether it be in the form of a therapist or a psychiatrist or whatever it was. And I never felt as a child that I was actually being labeled. My father was and my mother were super, super really good at not making me feel that I was a problem. That this was a problem, that this is an issue. they were incredible at that. They made me feel that this was just something that would help me to do better and to feel better about, feeling more accomplished, feel more focused. And I think at a certain age, I sort of believed that and believed in that. And I was wasn't really embarrassed by it. And sometimes I would wonder actually, how come dad doesn't talk to me about so much about my medicine, or some of these things. And then it was super interesting. As I got older, I realized, you know, my father never wanted me to feel that something was wrong with me. So, or nothing really was wrong with me. He didn't want me to see myself in the eyes maybe that an adult would see, which is I'm missing something. So we never spoke about it. It was more of just like, okay, took the medicine, maybe I missed a pill, maybe I didn't, but it was. I think that was very, very important part of, my relationship with him and the trust factor of that he believed in me that I was 100% capable and that this wasn't like some type of, God forbid, infection or a sense of my ability to focus or these other things where, it just was just, I'm perfect the way that I am. And I felt that. I really did.
Right. Well, it's a really big deal, especially back when I was growing up. It didn't seem like most adults knew much, and you're older than me. So you're really impressive.
I'm 47. I've been taking stimulants, listen, I stopped at 32 because my body really couldn't handle it as much anymore. It was sort of de facto. Like it just didn't work. But before that, I had taken those medications throughout every stage of my life and had experience at those, at every stage of taking these medicines. So,
Right. Well, is there anything you wish you had known as a kid? Like if you could go back and tell yourself as a little guy?
I probably would tell myself to just take it easy a little bit more, just try to relax through the process. Things like emunah and bitochen and, the idea, things we learn in Yiddishkeit that are as our bread and butter of being with Ribono Shel Olam. I picked up at around 17, 18, but as a child, you know, just, sort of working on developing the tools to sort of try to stay more in the moment or work on relaxing or being in relaxing types of environments, using certain tools to help create those moods and sort of feeling that vibe. When taking stimulants, it's very hard to climb out of that space when you're at 28 milligrams, then 5 milligrams, and you're in school most of the year and most of the days. And when you're getting off the medication, you're not just taking medication, you're sort of running downhill. And, it's like imagine running downhill and you're trying to stop yourself with your feet. It hurts your knees. So, even when you're like just sort of easing out from that very heightened sense of intellectual and emotional awareness that the medication sort of helps a person achieve, which sometimes is a massive stira. We can talk about that too. But, in the end, the way down was even harder. Just like all that energy release, like where are we going? What are we doing? And you gotta just find ways to allow that to release in healthy ways. I wish we have a lot more nowadays that provide a structure for that, potentially if you're aware. But back then it wasn't like that. It was just sort of coasting through these medicines.
Right. Well, any other takeaways from the elementary school experience come to mind?
Yeah, I think that I have certain memories in elementary school that, even though I struggled, I think socially, I know one thing. When I was treated poorly in some ways, or I felt hurt, and it was, I think through the stimulants, it was exacerbated because of it, because even though intellectually you're focused, your emotions are also super focused. So you'll feel deeper and it hurts more sometimes. But I really feel that I learned to care more for others, to really care about how they feel and to sense them. And I think going through that process actually, gave me an edge on social cues or having a heightened sense of awareness. I think it's social cues, but of how people feel, because I had gone through so much of a heightened sense myself.
So you really pulled out a positive from that negative experience, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, like I remember one time, like little kids, I don't talk about it that much, but you're in school, you're in a co-ed school, and I remember sort of in that space being, feeling sometimes some of the guys making fun of me, being a little embarrassed, and I really think back about how I never wanted to hurt anybody. I never wanted to be that guy that made me feel in that space so embarrassed. And I stayed far, far away from that. And I tried. And even if maybe I through my life, ended up, I needed some work on my ben on the Chavero as I matured and developed the right das and understood that this is not cool. Everything just clicked. So I guess it's just you have to trust, in Hashem that He's putting you through sometimes scenarios that will mature with you and that they'll become tools for you to use in your life. And you shouldn't be so quick to judge yourself. You just have to have a rutzon to want to improve, and it requires patience. So,
Wow, good for you. Okay, hopping up to high school, what was that like for you? What was hard? What was easy?
well, I went away to summer camps. It's a very big deal to develop some independence away from, my parents and my community, my friends, have a chance to make new friends so you can sort of create a new image. That was super important, going to camp where I really didn't know anybody, and yeah, I had a tough time there too a little bit. Was made fun of as a turn curl, but then suddenly in ninth grade, my braces came off. I put on some contact lenses. It became a little cooler, and it felt more accepted by my peers, and was incredible. I mean, those friendships, they were my first real friendships, and they've carried me for 30, 40 years with many of them. And, very deep. We didn't have technology. We didn't have the cell phones. We didn't have a life. When you're with someone, you were a lot more present. So camp was a very big deal for me. To sort of, blossom in a little bit. And then when I came back, I always felt like I was reintroducing myself to my peer class. I felt that renewed sense of, well, now I'm going to try to get all A's, or I'm going to work in class, or now I'm going to roll a little differently, or now I'm a little bit cooler. And it was pretty aggressive going away for 2 months and then coming back. I remember that. I remember that when I was I was very close to my grandparents on both sides, but my grandfather from Nashville, I remember very vividly in 10th grade, where I really didn't care as much about my grades in ninth grade. It was more about socially connecting with kids for the first time and like more chevra, friends, feeling more confident. But I remember he looked at me and he said, your dad, your uncles, you respect them, that they've got their businesses and that they're doctors. They worked super, super, super hard to get there. And it was so interesting. I remember the conversation in the car where I was like, so what are you telling me exactly? He's like, well, if you want to be matzliach and you want to be successful, you're going to have to work really hard. And I looked at that and I said, and it was the first time I actually was sort of digested that at that age that I have to create, I have to sort of bond with some kind of vision, an image of what I want to be, where I want to go. And once I was able to do that, I became hyper-focused on that. And it was like a rocket. I mean, I went straight to pretty much, all A's, principals list, National Honor Society between 11th and 12th grade. I couldn't deal with less than an A. I was competing with some of the top kids in my class. And it was such a shock to see that difference. And and I actually used my medication to help me along. I clicked with it. I figured out how to use it as a tool. I didn't feel intimidated by it. I didn't feel, held back by it. And I felt challenged by it. And the truth is, I started visualizing, well, I have an uncle that went to Cornell Ivy League. I'll go there too. And I'll go to hotel school. I don't want to make money. I don't want to be rich. And I still spiritually or emotionally not bonded with Avodas Hashem and Torah mitzvahs. Well, I had nothing against it and feel bad, about, I just felt like that was who we are. So I identified with that. But it wasn't a motivating factor in like my own path. It was more like what you see with your own eyes. How do I achieve that? And it was incredible to really step into that space of hyper focus, and but the vision became emotional. Besides for just in das, like I get you, Mike said to my grandpa. I understand you. I saw my uncle. I saw my father. I felt that success, and I was like, I think that's how I want to roll, and it drove me.
Interesting. So that you were able to tap in, you're able to use hyper focus to tap in once you had that image, if I'm understanding correctly.
Yeah. It was because the image was dramatic and it was real, and it was I could feel what the nafkamina was. I could feel what the practical, application in my own life would be. Like I could see the path. And once I saw that, I got spooked from the other side. I think there was a lot of emotions of fear also that would sort of like, no, no, you're right. You're right. I can't be there. I have to be here. So definitely, I don't think there was as much of a DOS thing. I think it was capable really of that time. It was more of what I saw by those who were around me and the way they rolled and how hard they worked and so on. And then I was like, well, I do want that. I do want that house. I do want that life. I do want that. And I don't know what goes into it. You're right. I have never made a cheshbon, but it's definitely going to have to be hard work. So let's just apply that to the challenges in front of me today. And it started off slowly, but I worked on it and it got easier. I really did get easier over high school.
Interesting. So, if I'm getting this correctly, it sounds like what you were able to do was tap into it using emotions, and as someone with strong emotions, that was was a way that was the thing that spoke to you. And because you didn't know what the long term process looked like, you felt you were able to tap into the moment, which is key for the ADHD brain. I got that right?
Yeah, exactly. Because everything that I did was sort of like, well, I'll just go with the flow. I mean, I needed a structure, which school gives you,
Right.
the grades and this and that. Go get A's, be a nice person, be a nice kid, be accepted by your peers, try to navigate these social relationships where it's not about being right or wrong in a relationship. It's more of like, I look at it as sort of just like a weird kind of like feeling good about my environment. Like I tell my kids all the time, it's like when you're dealing with teachers that you don't agree with them, you got to switch your mind frame. You got to look at your teacher as if your teacher's a customer. You want something from them. You want them to buy something from you. What's that? You want to sell them something so that they buy. And the currency is an A. The currency is a proud report. So, he's like, really? My kid's like, really? Like they're, yeah, I don't care how you get there. Because if you start using your DOS to try to get there, you get thrown off. It's more about, we just have to win the war. We have to get there. And I think that was what that was about.
Right. Well, any other strategies besides for these really good ones that you used through high school?
Nothing through high school more than that. I think it was super important that, the confidence of, peer acceptance is a super important ingredient. And I think that parents have to be encouraging on, as much as they can with the kids trying to figure out their own independence, on, kids developing chevra and developing friends and spending some time with them. It's super important.
Anything you remember specifically other than continuing what you had started before toward developing peer relationships in high school?
I knew that when I got to like 11th or 12th grade, when I made some decisions to become more religious after an experience I had in Cornell when I went there for the summer or some summer programs, I got a little spooked by the, sort of being thrown out into the world and some of the challenges that I was presented with in terms of Yiddishkeit. And I just felt that at the time, I really feel Hashem blessed me that I could sort of feel that it wasn't right to move away from what my grandparents and my parents, a certain, acceptance of orthodoxy and practice was. And you realized in those environments that was, you didn't have a choice. Either you're going in the opposite direction and you're moving farther away and you're testing the boundaries and the systems, or you're moving in the right direction. And I think that in my high school years, and we talk about peer development, let me just go back to that. Or peer, I remember that part of my development came with being able to give thought actively, like who I want to spend time with, or are they going to be good for me to spend time with, or are they going to pull me away from my goals? Anywhere as simple as maybe grades to just like when I started becoming a little more focused on Judaism and Yiddishkeit and feeling like trying to practice being more of like from a kid, I stopped going to the movies on Saturday and I sort of separated myself out from certain behaviors. And that was really important, by the way, and certain peers. But that was, although I had one of the greatest covers in the world, you know what I'm saying? I felt like, I just needed some time to identify myself differently. So I didn't want to keep rotating in the same behaviors all the time, same stuff. But that is one of I think the biggest chidushim in my high school years of my life that God blessed me with was that the combination of that experience at Cornell, which I don't recommend for anyone to send their kids out to these places. It's really, you need nisim and flows to survive out there in Yiddishkeit as an Orthodox person. The challenges are just too crazy. and the testing of the systems. Well, that's where I went to take a couple of courses, summer courses in school, and I'm grateful that I went and so on. But I'm just too young to you can learn independence and social skills and things, but to be in a fabric of a non-Orthodox or non-Jewish environment like that, to go from a completely sheltered 15 kids in my class type of environment to, going there. Although I think it helped me with confidence in my, my secular studies, going to an Ivy League and the vision of going there. And I don't regret, you know, making choices that were going to help stimulate me to be successful and feel successful. But I think the shock factor of going to type of environments and living with, a non-Jew and the, Jewish person who doesn't necessarily say, think like when it comes to the importance of tefillin and tzitzis, they don't have these mitzvahs as responsibilities, and you're living a life in certain structured life, although they were so nice and I enjoyed it. But I really didn't even have any non-Jewish friends growing up. I didn't have any, everybody, but such a shocking type of, cultural environment was for many people could have sent them another direction. But God was very kind to me. And I thought about a lot of things like, being with my parents and my grandparents and staying, what I learned in school and certain things. And I was able to get out of there. And then I right away I came back to after senior. I had Yom Kippur, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and I was a different person after that. I said I'm all in. And then I started learning my senior year. And I was going to tell you was I would go to the yeshiva myself as a senior and learn. But I was Wags yeshiva here in Miami. Spent a lot of private time there with myself and the Chumash. I would order Torah tapes, Gemara tapes up from New York to ship me all these tapes and put them in the cassettes in my yellow Walkman. I would sit. And first time in my life, it's an amazing story. I was learning Sukkah on the third parak from these Walkmans, and I was taking notes, and I never really learned Gemara on my own like that. I learned it in school. I grab an art scroll or whatever, and I was learning. I'm listening to some rabbi giving a shiur every day, and then one day, I wanted to go to shul early on a Friday. I don't know. I enjoyed the just feeling that I was going earlier than everybody else, just to sit there. It was sort of sending myself a message that there was that there was a lot of meaning in going to shul, earlier. And I said, what? I also heard if you say Shia Shirim, it's a good thing. So I sat in the corner, and I heard some guy come in, so looked like a rabbi, I guess, and he's talking to the rabbi of the shul, and I recognized his voice, and I went over to him. We started talking, and just was saying hello and trying to figure out if I knew him. And he looked at me and he goes, "Oh, by the way, I don't know if you know, but I do give some shiurim for ala daf or for the daf yomi." And I looked at him and I said, "Did you do the third parak in Sukkah?" He's like, "Yeah, I actually did do that." I said, "You're my Rebbe?" And those moments were so huge for me because I was sensitive to looking for some feeling that my relationship with, through all the efforts, that there was, that waiting for something special and being part of something special. And I saw that I'm like, Hashem, you're talking to me. Like out of all these people, like this is what I'm learning. You're introducing me to my Rebbe that I should have a Vedic connection. And these are the things that helped build my life as a senior. So when I got to Eretz Yisrael, I was already like a different kid.
Right. Wow. Okay, so Eretz Yisrael, post high school, college. What was difficult? What was easy? It sounds like you were already on a pretty good trajectory.
Yeah, I mean, I really jumped around a lot, but it was always with the objective of that goal to protect, I think, a higher, some real growth in what I found meaning with, which is learning and trying to develop the skills and, through the difficulties of being able to sit. But we did it. It became super hyper-focused, Baruch Hashem. So I graduated from the academy in 95 and went straight to Or Yerushalayim. What a great yeshiva, a special place, Rabbi Sosovsky and, and others there at the time. My cousin, Brian Baruch Simel, the cousin, was about 5 years older than me. Allah Shalom, who's Tzadik Yisrael, went there and grew tremendously there. He had chavrusas with Rav Nissel, he had chavrusas with Wagner, Rav Sosevsky. He was top of his class, and I saw that growth actually as his younger cousin, and I'm like, I'll go there. And my point guard, Harav Agoin, Menachem Levine, who's currently in Chicago right now. He went a year earlier to Eretz Yisrael, and I was in starting 11th grade. He was starting Eretz Yisrael. Came back, mom is dressed in the garb of the Ben Torah. So I started stimulating my thought through through high school. And I said, I want to go where they went. So I went to OJ. Problem was is that I had been, like I said, in the senior year, I had been buckling down and learning by myself and going to yeshiva. And I put on a jacket already. I got my velvet yarmulke on. I'm ready to identify more as a Ben Torah and be in that base medrash. And I'm looking forward to 3-star a day. And this is where I want to be. I feel for the first time in my life, I don't feel jagged. I don't feel anxiety. I feel like everything, this is the path that everything's going to be okay. I think, and I want to just, if I can, just digress for 1 second. We talk about ADD, ADHD, and, these concepts. Now that I'm a little older and I'm looking back at my life and I've been through all the medications and spent years just trying to hone in, I look at it as sort of like I'm hypersensitive, overstimulated type of person. I was. And people that are blessed with these some of these challenges, that they're super highly sensitive and stimulatable people, so constantly emotionally and intellectually sort of moving with where they feel the most stimulation. And there's a lot of noise, and there's a lot of competing interests for that focus, for that feeling. And it's very feeling based, very feeling driven. So I was very successful. For example, like I would, playing, see the guys, playing with pencils, playing with something in my hand, squeezing, shaking my legs, doing something physical in the process of trying to learn, drowned out a lot of the noise. And when also note taking became extremely critical, the physical aspect of taking notes, found myself being able to focus subconsciously on what was being said and getting the information. I had no problem with the intellect part, because I was actually writing and involved with something physical, sort of allowed a lot of the other noises to drown out. So when I got to yeshiva, it was really amazing. But, the shuckling, certain physical things, as well as, the fact that the Gemara, the pencils, the writing, these things, I found that I was able to sit many, many, many hours hyper-focused because I sort of built a world of stimulant around me, around my focus. So, but when I got to Eretz Yisrael, it's tough. I went to OJ, and then I decided that I wanted to leave because there were not enough guys in the base medrash from first year at the time that I was trying to get serious. And I left, and I ended up in Grus Kollel, hanging out over Yom Tov Sukkos. And then suddenly, I met a tzaddik Yisrael named Menachem Offish. I ended up in Keren B'Yavneh. And it was amazing. They were Blachman and by Rivlin. They were kind enough to bring me in. And when I got there, it was a Hezi Yeshiva, and it was shocking for me. I had Israeli chavusas. I had tzaddikim like, Chatzkel Freund Lecharav and my Balsam, and, people that I was around like Yehuda Frogon, or Rav Ari Leibowitz, or Rav Daniel Kamenetsky, and, or of Andy Yudin, and my roommate Menachem, and Aryeh Yudin, and my roommate Menachem Wolfish, and David Rossman. These are names of legendary people in the Yiddish world today. And Hashem gave them to me in my life through this process. And I can't believe it. I can't believe that through such an aggressive change, like leaving yeshiva, trying to find a new yeshiva and so on, he delivered me with such incredible people and I wanted to sort of roll like them. And in KBY, I sat there. I went through about 15 different chavrusas because nobody wanted to learn me because I really know how to learn. And I had to make my Gemara and my dictionary my friend. And actually, that was also helped me with my hyper focus. Having a dictionary, looking up every word that I didn't know, forcing myself into a system, and taking pride from that. I would bind my Gemaras, bind my dictionaries. I'd buy the best pencils, buy the best notebooks. I would have to dramatize what I was doing. So emotionally, I was so stimulated by it that it would drown out a lot of the other distractions.
You made your own merch.
Right. I made my own merch.
And manner of speaking.
Right,
yeah.
Right. So, so then when I was in KBY, I left KBY after 2 years. It was incredible. And I had a big debate to go to Ner Yisrael or YU because I really don't think I was ready for YU. But my whole chevra was going there. I wanted to be in yeshiva more and sit more. I needed it because just 2 years there wasn't enough for me. I was just to be bonded with certain commitments and certain things from where I was coming from. And but I didn't want to leave my chevra. So I went to YU. And, there, everyone's busy trying to focus on their own path a little bit. And even though we're a chevra, it wasn't the same. And after about 6 months, I realized that I wasn't happy, and I couldn't survive there. So I went to Israel. I moved in there and steigt. It was amazing. And it was just more focused, out of town. I was used to out of town environments and, calmer. It's a whole different ballgame. And I went to Johns Hopkins, for an MBA, a master's in MBA. So I didn't completely abandon the vision of higher secular learning for the purpose of, more strategic, um, tools for making money and business. But even though I didn't end up graduating from that at the master's, because I had some opportunities in Florida to leave a few years later that, again, distracted me from or I had to make a cheshbon not to finish. But the point is that each one of these steps that I made, it was super interesting, were made when I felt that I had no choice. And, I felt that I had a vision, I had something, starting with, I had a vision that I wanted to, I'll do my best to explain it, but I had a vision that of an emotional connection to feeling a specific way, being with Hashem in terms of learning and when I would learn Torah or when I would be in a base bedroom, be in a certain type of environment. I trained myself to feel a certain sense of calm and a certain sense of well-being. And when that got challenged, when that emotional state got challenged too much, and I felt that I was being drawn away from it, it became extremely dramatic for me, where it was like, if I leave this space, I'm in big trouble. And I knew myself. I knew what I needed to stay healthy and stay focused, but not in a tricky way, like a kid, like being sneaky about getting something. It was in a real way. And every move, my father used to say, people say, how do you let him drop out of YU and move to Israel? What's going on over here? He would say, my father, and I remember till today, he said, my son didn't drop out, he dropped up. So he would say, because they were all honest moves that came from a deep, I think, sense of emotional connection. But it was a hard thing, starting and restarting. But I think that's the biggest lesson from what's going on. You can't be afraid to restart if you're being honest with yourself, and it's real, and you're heading in the right direction, which would be, I want to be with Hashem, I want to protect my ruchnius, I want to protect my avodas Hashem, and that's the most important thing. If you have those goals, then everything sort of forms around it, and you can't lose. I used to say, Yiras Hashem kidoishav ki machzil re'ov. Yiras Hashem, if you want to fear God, kidoishav ki machzil re'ov. There's nothing missing for the ones who fear Him. Meaning, you can go with confidence to feel that in the end you won't be missing something. I think that emotional connection to trust, feeling that allowed me to get through some of those more jagged, harder times.
Right. Well, that's a big deal. Up next, what additional ADHD challenges came up once you were married and had kids? How did you address them?
Wow. I mean, each child is their own world and needs a specific, attention. Obviously, my wife, I need attention from her. I need my kids' attention, but I need, every relationship requires a tremendous amount of care. And yeah, I can't say that, with the providing for our family, trying to come up with ways to then make a living and, parnasa and bring in money and managing all my starim and, managing my independence, getting married at a young age and still drive to want to be in my own growth. At the same time, now I'm taking care of someone else and I'm growing together. I think that there were some really a lot of challenges of me being able to feel confident in my younger years that I'm with my wife, growing with my wife, that we're a unit, when I was still, talking about ADHD or ADD, still sort of hyper focused in certain other areas that I just sort of entered into over the last few years. Here's another area that requires a significant focus, and it's not as it's not as clear. Some of the other areas are more like, like grades, for example, or Les and Hopkins. You read the book, you read the material, you manage the material, you hope that the questions are appropriate. If you know the material, you'll get a specific grade, and it's a little more calculated. In business, you know, you pick a path. Either you get paid by the hour, or you're looking to buy a property, and you start doing research. So you can focus. You can create a structure for that. When it comes to relationships, it's extremely different. You're sort of blending the obstacle course or the playing field of a relationship to really produce is constantly being recreated at every moment in front of you. So you don't get the comfort of the learned behavior or the practiced behavior that so many ADD, ADHD kids do, the mechanics. I've done this. I've been down this road. I understand. I fought this battle. I've gone through this, and I've been successful. It's sort of like, wow, like I'm dealing with completely different, conversations and feelings, and especially that, my wife and I, Baruch Hashem, we were blessed in our first year of marriage of, 10 months, 11 months later of having a baby. It's like, and you don't know anything about this. You've never done this before. You don't know how you're going to feel and while you're balancing everything else. So I think there was definitely a challenging time, my Shana Rishona, Shana Shnia, and, those few first years and so on. But I tried to learn quickly, and thank God, my lovely wife is, we've been together for 25 years. So I guess I couldn't have messed up that bad. No, I'm just kidding. And I love her so much. She's so amazing. And she's really the best thing that ever happened to me. She's so down to earth and so focused. And she gets it. And once in a while she'll go, stop with the being all over the place, stop. Then she'll help me refocus. And I'm not embarrassed by that. I used to be a little more defensive about it. But I'm like, okay, just rope me in and let's, where are we going?
Right. What were some skills or techniques or ideas that you learned along the way?
Well, I think that just understanding that people that have some of what we call, ADD, ADHD challenges and so on. I really believe that they're, like I mentioned before, super, sensitive and very stimulated people. I think that runs that there's as well the ability through that. There's the potential through that to connect on a very deep level with, emotionally and even creatively, which is super important. Like what I find now, like in my jobs, my businesses and so on, the biggest stimulant I have is the creative process of creating partnerships and finding people's strengths and injecting a new idea into an already existing system, fine tuning something, finding a secret sauce, looking, I feed off that. I feed off that. I think I love people so much because the interactions with new people I'm stimulated by their story, who they are, what they love to do, the way they roll, how they, their character, at the same time, I'm super sensitive to poor character. I'm able to read, this is not the kind of person I want to chill with. This is not the kind, and act off of that. So this hypersensitivity, I've sort of embraced it and I use it as a tool and I love it. And I feel empowered by it. And I'm not always right. And, but I approach things with a sense of confidence now. I never had that in my life. It took me many years to just, and, I went from times where, like I said, I stopped taking medication at 32 years old. There were times where I had to just sort of allow myself to be, and not to harness myself too much, just to allow myself to be. And it's really hard. That's the biggest challenge, I think. It's finding that magical blend of like, when do I know I need to put on those controls and focus and be in that moment? How am I going to do that? I'm the only one that can make that choice. No one can make that choice for me. And that's another critical component in managing ADD, ADHD. The more that a person who has these challenges, the more that person identifies with the power of their choice and bonds with the freeing nature of saying, I got this and I get it. I get it that it's going to be hard for me and that's okay. And it doesn't mean because it's hard that I got to run away from it. I mean, guys go to the gym all the time and they pick up 250-pound weights and it's probably very difficult to do that, but they want to do it because they feel they're going to be some kind of benefit. We've got to get to that place where you got to fight through. And I think I try and I still fail. There are certain there are certain challenges. There are certain challenges that I have. Sometimes I wake up and I like sort of regress in my ADD or, ADHD, and I just like, wow, I'm really over the place. I wasn't used to that much stimulant, or I'm not on guard as much. Um, but I'm also okay with that. Like, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with baby steps and trying to just do better and better. And it's a time and place for everything also. You gotta understand that, you know, if you don't always say to fast and a little to fast, if you try to conquer everything in one shot, it's gonna be very difficult to do that. You gotta find things to be happy about and and live in that space. That's where Hashem wants you to be. I'm gonna try to do better, but I'm gonna live in that space.
Right. So today, you're involved, thank God, in a whole lot of things. So you're juggling a whole bunch of different things at the same time. And from what I can tell, you do it really well. So what do you do to balance all that?
Wow. Well, it's interesting. I feel like Hashem's been building my life over time, like we said, sort of being in that moment. And I try to do things with a lot of feeling. Sometimes I'll dramatize it too much, but I try to do things with a lot of feeling and throw myself in and make it and own it. I don't like to do things where it's sort of like just get by or just trying to be yotze, just sort of like do it to get it over with kind of thing. I don't enjoy those kind of things. It's got to have more meaning. So basically, as one of my cousins used to say, Eric likes to make big deals out of nothing. But what he's really trying to say is that like I'm a little more dramatic, and it sort of fits, I guess, with someone that's creative or someone that's sensitive or hypersensitive, where we want to feel that there's more meaning in what we do, which has its pros and cons. Sometimes there's certain environments where it's not about that. It's about just getting it done. You don't have to like fold. When you do under the laundry, right? Oh, yeah, because I'm going to fold every piece and I'm going to organize my closet in a way that is just like the best it's ever been. Like, and I mean, when if I like do laundry for some reason, I found myself, I like suddenly my whole entire closet's different now. And by the way, that's also a problem because I know the effort that goes into that, and maybe that's why I don't want to do it. Although, thank God, I have a wonderful, family, and somehow I don't know who's doing it. Maybe there's like a little alpha wakes up and doesn't know. I'm just kidding. Between the Haley good people, my, Valerie, and between, my lovely, amazing Ishis Chayil and so on, let me come here and do learn office and so on. And I still would do it also. But the point is that when I do something I'm familiar with, I've got to like make it a big deal. I got to make it a big deal. And that's okay. That's okay. It's going to get done. I'm going to clean the whole house. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. But, I had that one time during the entire conversation where I was just like, what did I just say? Wouldn't be an appropriate talk on ADD or ADHD if I didn't say that one time. So, you asked me the question about juggling a bunch of things now as an adult, all the different businesses or all the different, family life and all these other things. Well, at this stage right now, I feel very blessed. I feel like God has given me times to work on a number of these things at different times, some more than other. And I actually build my schedule. I tried to build my life around where I have more concrete times to be with family, to be with learning, to be with, Yom Tovim. There's certain times, and I'll try to build my schedule so I can focus more around that. But there are months where I'm all over the place. Like this definitely be the month. Like right now, I take the summers off a lot. And right before Yom Tov, we take off, you got to re-inject in business. You got to figure out where everything is. You come back to the office. Kids are getting back into school. And I'm absolutely all over the place. But but at this stage, thank God, I feel like I've done this before, and I just try to like, roll with it. So it's gotten a little easier to balance that.
Are there some skills you picked up along the way with regard to this?
Yeah, there are a number of skills. First of all, I find that when I sit with people, whether it's chavrusas or my office or listening to shiurim, where I'm active with something else other than just myself, my own thoughts, it helps keep me structured. It's a very important ingredient in feeling accomplished, and I work 3 times as fast. Okay, that's number one. That's definitely a skill. So private one-on-ones, having if I go to the gym, having a coach that's helping me in the gym, making sure I stay focused and on track and not running to my phone, even during, complicated hours. I learned to delegate a lot and to really understand, like, I can't do everything. My life began more, I got to do everything. It's mine. I got to make sure it's a certain way. And then I learned to be okay with I'm not going to grow. I'm not going to build. I'm not going to, if I don't allow people to take responsibility also. So that's definitely a skill that's taken me a lot of trust, to do. I think that you have to be able to manage, I think that exercise, the endorphins relevant to that comes out, running, feeling good. I think it's super important, because I think that ADD or ADHD people are, like I said, overstimulated or hypersensitive. If something's not right, you don't feel well, you feel off, it really does get exacerbated. It's much more difficult to fight through those moments and just stay with the techniques and structure. So you have to find a way, in a healthy way, to give yourself positive feelings. And I'm not talking about Band-Aid feelings, like sort of just like for the moment trying to crawl out and escape feelings because we're uncomfortable or difficult. I'm talking about proactive, offensive feelings, like a creative hobby, something you enjoy. Maybe it's reading, maybe it's, or working out or exercise, or maybe there's a certain kind of music you like to listen to, or maybe there's, certain you like to travel a little bit and you're planning a trip and you want to think about how exciting it's going to be. I think that's also important. It's okay to tap into the ADD, ADHD, hypersensitive mode and put those feelings into things, but it's got to be from a place of offense and not defense. And I constantly look for that. I'm looking for ways to invest myself. I've written songs. I have 14 songs on iTunes and music. I got into that space. I've written a book that I learned every summer with the boys, and I tap into that, and it gets better and better. I run the summer camp in the summer. I try to do things that add a little more color because also people with ADHD, we don't want to feel trapped. We want to feel stuck. We want to feel as if we want to be able to touch and feel different kinds of experiences. But you have to be offensive about that. You can't just assume that those things are going to come your way and you'll just pop into it. Because if you are not offensive and you're defensive, then all of that desire and sensitivity or desire to connect with something deeper and make you feel good, or the drama you may need to keep yourself stimulated, you end up making poor choices because unfortunately, if you're not focused to making good choices, you'll default into poor choices. You start eating a bunch of donuts every day. You have 50 donuts a day because you love donuts. You end up being 400 pounds. Because why? Because I got donut, I don't know. You're driving down the street. Every time you see a billboard that says like, a fast food restaurant, and you see a picture of a burger or something, you're running there. These are part of that overstimulated, hypersensitive, dramatic, I want to enjoy life feelings that you need to work on replacing those with other things where you feel accomplished and feel good. And if you're not living offensively, you're going to default into some kind of poor behavior potentially on the defensive side. So I really think that's the tools that I use to try to manage my own reality.
It's really wise. I like that. You've mentioned some before, but any other ADHD superpowers of yours you want to mention? The music, the writing, the sensitivity, we got a whole bunch. But anything else come to mind?
Yeah, when you talk about superpowers, wow. Well, first of all, I definitely feel that when I'm sitting with someone and I'm, trying to read them, emotionally, I think that because I myself am hypersensitive in some ways and I myself feel things in a deep level, I'm able to connect to that and read through it. And I'm also very stimulated to avoid conflict and solve conflict. Like it bothers me. Conflict bothers me tremendously. I don't enjoy. I don't want it. So because I emotionally am disconnected from that, and I don't want it. So I'm quick to say I'm sorry. I don't like to fight, even though I like to be right. And sometimes I get stuck in that mode. But once I realize it's gone too far, I'll back off. So and that's also a superpower, I think, nowadays, that you don't want to like stick your shita in the mud. Like I'm not a Baal Shita. I'm not like sitting there saying, this is what I think is right. Like I'm very maneuverable because I'm interested in feeling and understanding the other guy's stuff, but if it sounds off, I'm also able to sense that pretty quickly and distance myself from it and be like, no, we don't connect on that. Something's off. It doesn't feel right. So I definitely think that that for me is really important. And also, superpower. Like, look, I think there is one thing that God gave me a real gift, which is that I think I'm on a hunt for not to get lost in, becoming a fake person, becoming fake, becoming just superficial in essence, or I think I think that because I went through some of these challenges and I struggled so much to find emotional stability and a place of calmness to find, I always feel that it's okay. Like if I got lost in the middle of all of that, I really feel that Hashem has helped me connect so emotionally to a world with Him. I say to myself all the time, I could find a way to be happy. If I just give me my Gemara, give me a stender, I'll go back to the base medrash. Like I don't like to define myself by a lot of things other than just sort of try to find I'm able to feel more joy because I feel like by default I could dumb it down. I could go back to like which is really interesting. Even though through all the stimulant that I'm looking for, and they're all positive and trying to be offensive and so on, I'm always checking myself that I shouldn't become a slave to it. That I should be okay just being with myself. Like I go to the park and just sit there for a little bit. And I think that's really becomes an ADHD superpower, because when I'm taking a few moments to be by myself, when I'm going to the park, when I'm taking a few moments to relax, or I'm listening to a song, or I'm just not, I'm trying to climb out of all of those, that need for being stimulated in the whole world. I know that that's much harder for me than most people. I know that that's difficult. And I'm starting to feel like a sense of pride that I've been able to do that. So that I guess that would be for me a superpower. The other direction, though,
Right. I mean, it's a skill you've
those
learned so
moments
well.
become more.
Right.
Those moments become more powerful because I work so much harder for them.
Right. Well, okay. So as we start to wrap it up, do you ever hear anyone say that ADHD is quote unquote not real? If you do, what do you say when you hear that, and what do you want to say when you hear that?
God made so many different kinds of people, and there are people that are naturally just distracted, either b'das or emotionally or in their mind, and and they've got and it could come from a lot of reasons. It could come because they don't they feel uncomfortable and they're trying to like change things up, or they're not stimulated by their environment that they're in because it's boring as anything, or because they just naturally are inquisitive, or they're smart, or they're super genius, or whatever it is. Whatever it is, the bottom line is, everybody, every single neshama was put into every single person, and is no one alike. And the platform of operation of that neshama, the body and the sensitivities and the character and all those things are different for every single person. So, the fact that you have people that have a harder time in one way or another way, we can bucket it. We could say ADHD is real. It's not real. It's people. There's definitely a group of people that need help to control the distractions of external stimulations, and it could come from a number of reasons. And when they're uncomfortable, they're not shy to basically get me out of here. And if it means banging on a table, making noise, being all over the place, it's because that environment is just not, it's not settled, it's not set for them. So yeah, attention deficit disorder, trust me, I've been in classes that are in shiurim that I love, and I want to listen to every word. And I've been in ones where I'm like, get me out of here. It's the most boring thing ever. You're going to call me ADD because I didn't enjoy that. So the reality, but at the same token, I do believe that people are more prone to over hyper stimulation intellectually, emotionally, and it's hard for them to know that. I used to envision myself as sort of having like a ADD, like I have like this nova pulse inside me of like the sun, and it goes low, and then I would feel it growing up. And then it would sort of like wanted to explode out, and then it would go low again and explode out. I just couldn't control that amount of energy. It's just. But now, in my older age, you can talk to people that I work with. You talk to people, my chavrusa, talk to this, and I'm all over the place. They'll say I'm in this and this and this, but but it's from such a controlled place. I can talk to you about every number and every deal I'm in. I can talk to you about the sugis and the daf yomi and most of the gemaras that I'm holding. I can show up and give a shir for 2 hours. Oh, and last night I spoke in yeshiva for 45 minutes. I actually don't even really have to prepare anymore. Not because I know everything and I know what I'm going to say and das this and that. It's just that there's been a certain sense of hyperfocus that I've stepped into from all my different learned experiences. And I think it's only because I have ADD and ADHD that I've been able to, Baruch Hashem, been blessed to accomplish certain things in my life that I don't think the average Joe could have been, could have done. So that's only from Hashem, obviously, all from Hashem. But we gotta grab it, hold on. Like we say, we're a bunch of cowboys riding horses. Make sure you have a good saddle on. And make sure you're pointing in the right direction, and just don't go too fast because you might fall off the horse.
Okay, wow, amazing. Any further message of hope you want to leave our listeners with today?
I think art, and this is one thing that I really definitely I'm seeing as I get older, I think art, either creating or not actually drawing, but being involved in the process of, picking specific pictures and paintings. And I think that's been playing a very critical role for me to, at this stage of my life, to spend some more time relaxing and getting into a more focused format. It's forcing me it allows me, when I look at all the colors of something, to use my creative imagination to run through, and I get stimulated by that. So I think art and staring at different paintings and trying to interpret it and understand it and bond with a piece and talk about it, I find that that's completely underutilized in being able to, create and give an ADD or ADHD person a sense of sipuk in stimulation. And I think it should be introduced more into our world.
Okay, wow. Anything else you wanted to share today?
I want to share how happy I am that I could speak with you. You're a mentor of mine and a friend of mine, and Halavai B'Zei can spend many more years with you in the summer. And thank you for letting me talk about my life a little bit with everybody and use what God gave me to, be able to, maybe help people feel better understood. And, I think it's very important to remember, like my cousin Brian Elchonon used to say, tranquilo. Like just sometimes you got to just slow down. And it's okay to tell that to yourself and to start to see yourself sometimes moving too fast and say, whoa, let's take it easy. It's okay. You got to get in with it. You got to know who you are. You got to study it. You got to get comfortable with it, and you got to roll with it.
Okay, amazing. Rabbi Elchonon Galbut, thank you so much for joining us today. Should I put contact in the show notes?
Of course. My pleasure. Anybody who wants to be in touch with me, it'd be my honor.
Okay, amazing.
You.
All right, thank you.
Thank you so much. Take care, Rabbi. Thank you.
Thank you again for listening to this episode of the ADHD Heroes podcast. For questions about the podcast, you can email us at adhdheroespodcast@gmail.com. Also, for sponsorships or to share your story, your ADHD story, you can also email us at the same place, adhdheroespodcast@gmail.com. To be in touch with me about ADHD coaching, writing, or speaking engagements, you can email me at rsreichadhdcoach@gmail.com. Be sure to check out my website, rsreich.com, adhdcoach.com. You can follow me on LinkedIn, or you can check out my blog on nefesh.org. Check out my blog there under my name. Important disclaimer: podcasts are great, but they do not take the place of mental health help or medical help. So if you need help with mental health or need a doctor, be sure to be in contact with some of them. Please, if you like this show, please rate, review, and share with a friend. That's how these things get out there. Thank you again for listening, and thank you to our producers at Pretty Easy Podcasts.